Hi, everybody. This is part 2 of 3 parts on proofs for the existence of God. It's also a short midweek devotion from the Littleton United Methodist Church, although obviously I'm not in Littleton right now. Thomas Aquinas was a 13th century philosopher theologian. Many people think he was maybe one of the most influential theologians in the history of the church. There's um, the Apostle Paul, there's Augustine, there's Aquinas, there's a few others out there, and among Protestants, of course, Luther. Um, but he is a giant when it comes to philosophy and theology. Some of his ideas, many of his ideas, are still in vogue today. Nevertheless, the 13th century, this is the 21st century, there are quite a few centuries between us and Thomas Aquinas. And during that time, people have challenged his proofs for the existence of God. Now, if you want to know more about those proofs, God is the first mover, he is the uncaused cause, he is the necessary thing for everything else to exist because everything else is contingent upon something before it. He is, you can see in nature and intelligent design that God is God. He is the ultimate measuring model for good, for evil. Without the existence of an ultimate good and ultimate evil, there would be no such thing as good and evil. It'd just be everybody has their own opinion of what's good. Like I said, there's been a lot of centuries go by, and people have challenged each one of these claims. So none of them goes without a formidable challenge, and yet nothing is totally overthrown or proven any of them to be wrong. So we are left with these 5 claims that are not proven wrong, and yet they're not proven that they prove that God does exist. Does that make sense? Um, and to make matters maybe even a little more prickly in this, is just a simple fact that you and I were born with a set of cultural glasses. We've talked about this before. The cultural lenses, and that no matter how hard we try, we see everything through those lenses. So some of you that are listening to me, if you were born in certain families and certain cultures, it would just make sense that God existed. I mean, how could anything pre-exist itself? Something had to be there to start it all. If you were born and raised an atheist background, you might think that's just superstition. It's just reaching out for something because we don't understand it yet. Obviously, something must have existed before anything existed because stuff does exist, but that doesn't mean it's God. And those that have kind of a theological slant on things, it goes pretty deep. And those that have an atheistic slant, it goes equally deep. So it becomes difficult to cross over into other cultures to understand why others think the way they do. Wow, that's kind of a mouthful. Now, in this particular devotion, I don't have a lot of time, 5, 10 minutes, but I'd like to explore logic just a moment. Oh, and Nala's come to visit me? There are basically two types of logic that we work with. One is inductive logic, one is deductive logic, and you don't really want me to get very deep into this, and I don't really want to get very deep into this. So just on the surface level, deductive logic is a special type of logic that we use to totally prove something that we want to prove. That is, deductive logic with its syllogisms and its different forms is set up in such a way that if the premises are accurate and the forms are correct and valid, then the object, the conclusion we're coming to, must be true. No doubt about it, no wiggle room about it. Now, deductive logic is very powerful, but some argue that it's of somewhat limited use. And why is that? Because there are not that many things in life that we can absolutely 100% always, prove without a doubt that this happens. Maybe something mathematical or something within categories, But most of the things we do in life use inductive logic. And inductive logic is that form of logic that we can't prove something 100%, but we want to be certain as possible that that we are accurate, that we are right, but we just cannot prove it. Statistics can be very valuable, especially like in fighting COVID or something, but statistics don't prove something 100%. The scientific method with forming a hypothesis and testing the hypothesis and on the result of the test either tossing out the hypothesis or modifying the hypothesis or going to a further test. We can be very accurate with something. We often hear those on the news, especially in the last couple of years with COVID, say trust science. But science, the scientific method does not prove anything 100%. Juries in a court of law, they try to decide whether a person is guilty or not beyond a reasonable doubt, and they bring the evidence together, but they don't prove that anything's true. It is possible a person can be found guilty and really be innocent, or a person could be found innocent and really be guilty. And yet, most everything you and I do in life, we do based on inductive logic. It's not only powerful and helps to bring certitude up, it doesn't prove it. A far-fetched example. Every day in my life, the sun has come up. So therefore, I'm pretty certain the sun's going to come up tomorrow, but something might happen. I can't imagine what. I'm pretty certain the sun's coming up, but it could. Now, I hope you understand the difference. It's very important to what I'm talking about today to understand deductive logic and inductive logic. And the reason it's important is because Thomas Aquinas' proofs for the existence of God were based on inductive logic. That is, they didn't prove that there was a God. They proved or gave evidence or arguments that say it's reasonable to believe in God. It makes sense to believe in God. And on all these different categories, intelligent design, and that we have a basic understanding that there is good and evil. And then there must have been something to start the ball all in motion to start with. And that before anything was existed, something must have existed for anything to come into existence. All of these types of things, the first cause, there must have been a cause that caused the rest. These in themselves do not prove there's a God, but when you put these all together from all the different facets out there, they say that it is reasonable to assume that there's probably a God out there. Now, every once in a while, somebody will come on Facebook or internet arguments, social media or something, and they will take apart one of these or find a weakness in one of these arguments of Aquinas, and they would say, aha, we just proved there's no God. Well, they haven't proved there's no God. They've proved that it's possible that you can look at this proof and still not believe in a God. Well, that, we already knew, basically. But they say it in such a way that it sounds like, oh, we've disproven God. Science has disproven God, but that's not accurate. And they give us the impression, in so doing so, that it's unreasonable to believe in God, that it's superstitious to believe in God, that it's irrational to believe in God. But that's not the case. If you take all of these different proofs together as inductive proofs, evidences, arguments for the existence of God, you may still not believe in God, but that's a big jump from proving that there is no God, or even that those that believe in God are being irrational for doing so. We tend to set up straw men. That is, or straw persons today, we would say. That is, we will take an argument, and the argument is fairly complex and fairly deep, and it's a little bit hard to knock over, so we kind of make a caricature of that argument, or of the person making the argument, that looks a little silly and goofy, and we blow that over in the hopes that whoever we're arguing with thinks we've blown over the argument. But that's not the case. We've just made a straw person to knock over, and not the argument. Go back over last week's proofs. Look at all 5 of them. Realize that these are not all of the proofs out there or evidence out there for the existence of God. This is merely 5 proofs from a theologian that lived in the 13th century about why it's reasonable to believe in God. And clear down in the 21st century, every one of those leans toward it's reasonable to believe in God. Now, an atheist may also think it's reasonable not to believe in God. I could give him that. But it's not irrational to believe in God. There's evidence out there. And I've only picked one person from the 13th century with their 5 ideas. There are other proofs, evidences for the existence of God out there, many that are newer than that, and many that try to be inductive, or at least 1 or 2 that try to be inductive in their reasoning. And so I just wanted to bring this to you today, that there is weight enough for intelligent, rational people to believe in God without being superstitious, okay? I've met many. Now, while I'm at it, we're going to go a little farther in this discussion next week. This is week 2 of 3 weeks that I want to talk about this. And what we're going to do next week is we're going to go to another piece of evidence, because there probably aren't a lot of people out there that are converted to or from Christianity. I'm going to take that back. That are converted to Christianity on the basis of these 5 arguments for God. Most of us that are Christian weigh in with a different piece of evidence that has changed our minds, and so that is that's what we'll look at next week. Now, The reason I stumbled over myself when I said that is, I think there are a number of people that were raised in Christian homes that went to churches, and I don't want to be negative when I say this, but sometimes these kinds of deep discussions, we yawn or we don't want to get messed up in. And so when our children grow up, they are not fed a deeper view of Christianity. They get off to a college someplace, meet a professor that wants to unwind everything. And sometimes your freshman, sophomore year in college, senior year in high school, you meet the right instructor. They can unwind a lot of the things you were raised with, if those are things that you weren't sunk too deeply in to start with. And so I think a lot of people may have taken arguments against these five proofs to persuade them that there is no God. And if that is you, I would like to say, if you don't want to believe in God, that's your decision, but it's not irrational too. If you want to look over last week's discussion, I'll try to put the link on at the end of this. Next week, we'll be going a little bit farther with this. And in the meantime, during this week, we're starting a brand new year. And may this new year just be the best year ever in your life. May God work in you in a new way all through this year. May God bless you and watch over you and take care of you through the rough stretches of the year.